The little boy hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Not a full sentence. Not a laugh. Not even a smile. Doctors called it severe autism mixed with trauma after the accident that took his father away. Therapists tried everything. Schools gave up quietly. Even his own mother had started losing hope in the silence that filled their massive mansion every single day. But on a bright Tuesday afternoon, inside a crowded downtown restaurant where expensive people barely noticed the staff carrying plates around them, a tired single father working double shifts did something no specialist in the world had been able to do. And when the billionaire CEO looked across the room and saw her son smiling at a waiter for the very first time in his life, she completely froze. Before we begin this emotional story, if you believe kindness can change lives and that second chances still exist in this world, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Tales. Your support helps bring more heartfelt stories like this to people who need them most. The restaurant sat in the center of the city's financial district, glowing with polished glass windows and afternoon sunlight reflecting off silverware and crystal glasses. Every lunch hour was chaos. Executives barked orders into phones while servers rushed between tables carrying trays that felt heavier with every passing hour. Among them was Elias Mercer, a 34-year-old waiter with exhausted eyes and gentle hands. Most customers never noticed him beyond the menu in his hand, but Elias carried an entire world on his shoulders. After losing his wife to cancer 2 years earlier, he had become both mother and father to his 7-year-old daughter, Ivy. He worked mornings at a grocery store, afternoons at the restaurant, and spent nights helping Ivy with homework inside their tiny apartment above an old laundromat. Sleep had become a luxury he barely remembered. Despite the constant pressure, Elias had a softness about him that people rarely saw anymore in busy cities. He remembered birthdays, fed stray cats behind the building, and always packed half his meal for the homeless veteran who sat near the subway entrance. His kindness wasn't loud. It was quiet and consistent, born from pain instead of comfort. That same afternoon, Celeste Laurent entered the restaurant with her 8-year-old son, Orion. The moment they walked inside, conversation seemed to shift around them. Celeste was one of the youngest CEOs in the country, owner of a billion-dollar technology empire, constantly appearing on magazine covers beside headlines praising her brilliance and ruthlessness. Yet beneath the expensive suit and composed face was a woman drowning in loneliness. Since her husband's death in a car crash 4 years earlier, she had buried herself in work while desperately trying to help the son who no longer connected with the world around him. Orion hated crowded places. The sounds overwhelmed him instantly. Glasses clinking, chairs scraping, dozens of voices crashing together like waves against his mind. He clutched tightly onto a small toy airplane while avoiding eye contact with everyone around him. Several customers stared when he began rocking slightly in his chair, whispering under their breath the way people often do when they don't understand something. Celeste noticed every stare. She always did. Her body stayed tense, prepared for another public meltdown, another moment of humiliation, another reminder that she was failing her child no matter how much money she spent trying to save him. Then Elias approached their table. Unlike the others, he didn't force a smile or speak too loudly. He simply knelt slightly to Orion's level and noticed the toy airplane in his hand. Elias had once bought the exact same toy for Ivy years ago at a gas station during a road trip before his wife became sick. That tiny memory softened his tired face immediately. Without making a scene, Elias folded a paper napkin into a tiny airplane while waiting for their order. His hands moved carefully, almost absent-mindedly, until the little paper plane sat perfectly in his palm. Then he gently slid it across the table toward Orion like it was the most normal thing in the world. Something changed. Orion stopped rocking. The noise around him seemed to fade for just a second as he stared at the paper airplane. Slowly, cautiously, he picked it up. Elias didn't push further. He simply smiled softly and returned to work. Celeste watched in disbelief. For the next 20 minutes, every time Elias passed the table, Orion glanced toward him. It was small. Almost invisible. But to a mother who had spent years praying for connection, it felt monumental. Then came the moment that shattered her completely. A tray slipped from another waiter across the room, crashing loudly against the floor. The restaurant jumped at the sound. Orion immediately covered his ears, panic flooding his face as his breathing spiraled out of control. Several customers turned to stare again. Before Celeste could calm him, Elias rushed over quietly carrying noise-canceling headphones from the employee break room. He knelt beside Orion, not touching him, not overwhelming him, simply placing the headphones near the boy and rolling another paper airplane slowly across the table. And then it happened. Orion smiled. It was tiny. Brief. Fragile. But real. A smile that hadn't appeared in years spread across the little boy's face while he looked directly at Elias. Celeste felt her breath catch so hard it hurt. Tears instantly blurred her vision. Therapists had spent years trying to pull even the smallest emotional response from her son, and this exhausted waiter had done it in minutes simply by treating Orion like a human being instead of a problem to solve. The entire restaurant faded around her. For the first time since her husband died, Celeste felt hope. Over the following weeks, she kept returning to the restaurant. At first she told herself it was because Orion liked the food, but deep down she knew the truth. Every visit brought small miracles. Orion began speaking tiny words again. He started drawing airplanes at home. Once, he even laughed quietly when Elias showed him how to balance sugar packets into little towers. Elias never realized the impact he was making. To him, Orion was just a lonely child who needed patience. He understood loneliness better than most people ever would. One rainy afternoon, Celeste arrived earlier than usual and accidentally saw Elias outside the restaurant during his break, sitting on the curb beside his daughter Ivy while sharing a single sandwich between them. Their clothes were damp from the weather, but they were laughing together beneath a broken umbrella like they owned the world. That image shattered something inside her. This man who had given her son hope was barely surviving himself. The next morning, Celeste made calls that changed multiple lives forever. She created a foundation focused on supporting single parents raising children with disabilities and offered Elias a leadership position managing community outreach despite his lack of corporate experience. The salary was more money than he had ever imagined earning in his life. At first, Elias refused out of pride and fear, but Celeste reminded him that kindness like his was rare and desperately needed. Months later, the foundation opened its first family center downtown. Children painted walls bright colors while exhausted parents finally found support systems they never had before. Ivy had her own reading corner there. Orion spent afternoons folding paper airplanes beside Elias, smiling more every single day. And Celeste often stood quietly in the hallway watching her son slowly return to life because one struggling waiter chose compassion in a moment when nobody else bothered to care. Sometimes the biggest miracles do not come from wealth, power, or fame. Sometimes they come from exhausted people carrying their own pain while still finding room to be gentle with others. Before this story ends, if it touched your heart even a little, please like, share, and comment below to support Lifeline Tales. Stories like this remind us that kindness still matters in a world that often forgets to slow down and care.